Good afternoon to those on the West Coast, and good local time to wherever else you're joining us from. My name is Jesse McKee, and I'm the head of strategy at 221A. I lead the fellowships and digital strategy at the organization. Today, we're here to talk with Syrus Marcus Ware and æryka J. Hollis O'Neill about the launch of a new fellowship and storytelling project. Before we dive into our conversation today, I'd like to address the gross land inequity upon which 221A finds itself in the city of Vancouver, which is built upon the unceded, unsurrendered, and traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. These are the Squamish and Hunkaminam-speaking peoples who have stewarded and continue to steward these lands and waters since time immemorial. At 221A, we endeavored to shift our organizational practices to work together with Indigenous people to end ongoing violence, dispossession, and displacement. I'd like to share a bit about our artists today. Syrus Marcus Ware is a Vanier Scholar, a visual artist, activist, curator, and educator. Syrus is an assistant professor at the School of Arts, McMaster University, and Syrus uses drawing, installation, and performance to explore social justice framework and Black activist culture. His work has been shown widely, including in solos, shows at Grunt Gallery, and new work commissioned for the 2019 Toronto Biennial of Art at the Ryerson Image Center. Those works were Antarctica and Ancestors, Do You Read Us? Dispatches from the Future. And his work has been shown in group shows at the Art Gallery of Ontario, University of Lethbridge Art Gallery of York University, the Art Gallery of Windsor, and as part of the curated content at Nuit Blanche 2017, Toronto. The Stolen People Won't Back Down. Syrus holds a doctorate from York University in the Faculty of Environmental Studies. He is the co-editor and of the best-selling book, Until We Are Free, Reflections on Black Lives Matter in Canada. And also joining us is æryka J. Hollis O'Neill, who is in Chicago and is a concurrent PhD candidate in Black Studies and MFA student in documentary media, and a Mellon Cluster Fellow in the Critical Theory program at Northwestern University. æryka also holds a Master of Arts in American Studies and a graduate certificate in documentary filmmaking from the George Washington University in Washington, D.C. Their interdisciplinary research spans the field of Black, queer, and trans studies, Black feminist theory, political ontology, visual culture, performance studies, and film theory and practice. Identity formation and its discontinence are essentially at the core and crux of their academic research and artistic practice. She's currently working on her dissertation, Translating the Void, Anti-Blackness, Racial Adaptation, and Trans Narrativity from Stage to Screen and in Between, which examines Black gender identity through narratives of racialized gender transition and adaptation. Their MFA experimental documentary thesis film, In the Interval, considers related themes of racialized gender, sexuality, desire, kinship, enfleshment, and embodied capital, personhood, violence, and belonging. The first imaginings of the project that we're going to talk about today took place during the deep quarantine times of the pandemic and has since been retooled now a few years on. We were fortunate enough to be able to gather together for a week in Vancouver just before the last Christmas season in order to re-workshop the concept of a storytelling project that will commission new speculative fiction shorts by a community of authors. These stories will form the manuscript for a new book edited by Syrus and a new podcast series that we're going to produce together. A little bit about our fellows at 221A. Since 2017, 221A has worked with 14 fellows to conduct research over extended periods of time. Each fellow receives a living wage stipend and production support to lead projects for potential social, cultural, and ecological infrastructure. Staff work alongside fellows to resource and translate research into public education, learning programs, engaging plans to develop new infrastructure. Stay tuned to our channels for an open call for new fellows later this year. Fellows in this new version of our program will receive a living wage stipend, a production budget, and a free studio space for 18 months at our new facility in downtown Vancouver at 825 Pacific Street, opening later this year in the summer. I'd like to thank Canada Council for the Arts for their support of this fellowship through the Digital Now program. If you'd like to support 221A as it develops long-term paid opportunities for artists like Syrus and æryka, please give to our ongoing fundraiser through our website, 221a.ca/donate. I'll paste the link in the chat. Syrus and æryka's presentations will run for about 40 minutes and we'll have time afterwards for questions from our live streamers today. Please ask your questions in the text in the Q&A box below or raise your hand if you'd like to join us with a live voice. Just to note, our event today is being recorded So if you would prefer to remain off camera, your face and your voice, please ask your questions in the Q&A box. Syrus, I'll pass it over to you. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about your project and how you met æryka and invited her into this process.
Thank you so much. And thanks, Jesse and Tao and everyone at 2218. It's been such an amazing experience getting to work with you and all the folks at Visitor Media and just everyone involved in this project. I'm coming to you from Tuggerandeau, but from the part of Tuggerandeau that was underwater at the time of the Toronto Purchase, so the unceded territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. And this area is really special because it's been home to some pretty incredible peacekeeping systems like the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the Dish with One Spoon Wampum. And it means a lot to get to be here and to be in solidarity and support of land back and Indigenous resurgence while I'm working here. So yeah, I was driving actually in the summer of 2020 and, trying to grapple with what had happened. The world had shut down. We were sort of uh, isolated, but also recharging, and there was just so much happening. There had been a series of uprisings throughout the summer of 2020, and a whole bunch of activism that I was on the front lines of, and it was really quite an incredible summer and moment of reflection. And I was driving up to visit a friend in the country, and we were going to have this distanced visit. Remember those? And I was driving, and I was thinking, oh, I wonder where we're headed. I wonder where we're going. And like Walida Emerisha, who writing in Octavia's Brood, which is this collection of writing about Octavia Butler, or in the spirit of Octavia Butler, she says that all activists should engage in speculative fiction writing and science fiction because that's what activism is. It's daring to dream that another world is possible. So I was driving along and I was sort of thinking about activism and thinking of science fiction and thinking about where we were headed. And I was like, oh, I wonder what would happen if, I invited a bunch of people who don't typically write speculative fiction. If we got them to sort of write or imagine stories that happen in the next 100 years. I would love to read a short story book full of short, digestible, stories about the potential of what might happen sometime in the next 100 years. And so I, had this idea of bringing together a bunch of authors and activists and systems change and systems thinkers and organizers and artists to write a bunch of stories, 1,000 words or 2,000 words, that imagine some kind of future that what we weren't currently living. So I had spent time with Octavia Butler in 2005, and she had talked about how in order to sort of write these very prescient books the way that she did, she just studied human history and followed the trajectory that we were on, and then said, if we go XYZ down the road without changing this or that or that or that, where might we be? And that's what she wrote about, and she ended up being so precise. And so I was thinking, what might happen if we had a bunch of people thinking and imagining, studying human history and imagining where we might be headed for the next 100 years. So I wrote a bunch of authors and a bunch of people, and they all wanted to write, which was great. And so we started collecting these stories. And then we had this idea. We were walking under a blue heron nesting ground in Vancouver in Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh territory, and we were talking. Jesse and I were talking about, and Sean were talking about the potential of telling a different kind of story, and we cooked up this idea of working with digital media to do what ultimately became this digital project where we're going to be taking some of these stories that have been written and some of the stories that we're soliciting and turning them into podcasts and potential small animations that tell these different stories about our potential future. So it's really exciting. I'm really looking forward to diving into a whole bunch of other worlds and other possibilities. Adrienne Marie Brown talks about speculative fiction writing as practicing the future. And so we're going to get to practice the future together through these stories. And I'm really, really looking forward to it. I had the pleasure of getting to meet æryka in Chicago earlier in 2022. I was working on a we're working on a collaboration where we're exploring the experiences of Black trans people throughout the Americas, in North America, Central and South America, and creating this multilingual, multimodal digital and book compilation exploring the experiences of Black trans, non-binary, and gender non-conforming people, here in this place. And got to meet Erica and got to learn of her practice and her creative practice and her academic and scholarly practice, and just was so excited about the potential of working with Erica to somehow make some of what we're going to be doing come to life. And so, was like, oh, hey, is it another project idea? Would you love to come to Vancouver for a bit of a wild time in the snowy winter days of December in Vancouver? And lo and behold, she said yes, which was wonderful. And we met up in Vancouver, and the rest was history, as they say. So I'm really thrilled to welcome Erica. I am so thankful for your creative practice, for what you're putting out in the world, and I'm so in awe of your what you're generating and what you're making happen. So thank you and welcome. And I think it's my job now to introduce Erica Jourdaine and to pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, Syrus, and Jesse, for those beautiful introductions and opening remarks. Yeah, I'm really happy to be here and excited to be in conversation with you both. Also, excuse me if my dog is like sneezing throughout or making noise apart from that. So yeah, thank you for that introduction. I think I'm just gonna share first in beginning of our conversation a bit about my background and my work beyond what's already been shared, and then end with an excerpt of my work from my thesis film that I produced last year, as sort of just an illustration of that, because I feel like it's always easier or sometimes more generative to show rather than tell the work. So as has already been shared, I'm æryka jourdaine Hollis O'Neill. I'm based out of Chicago, though I'm currently in Southwest Arizona, which is the ancestral homelands of the Tohono O'odham Nation and the multi-millennial presence of the Pasquayaqui tribe. So I just want to take a moment and acknowledge the tribal nations who have served as the caretakers of this land. So yeah, let me share my screen first to begin a little bit about my work. Let's see if I can go that. All right. So, as has already been shared, both my doctoral and my scholarly work are essentially both interested in different ways, albeit in different mediums, around questions of identity formation and performance and ontology, and desire, particularly as it relates to racialized gender and sexuality. But my MFA work, which I completed last year, was predominantly oriented around experimental and hybrid modes of documentary, with a focus in better understanding the ruptures and relations of kinship within a collective context of structural anti-Blackness globally. So on the left, you can see two still images from two different short films I did. And I'm still working on that series in an attempt to get at these themes through isolating different senses, one on touch and one on sight, respectively. But the culminating project of my MFA last year was my thesis film, In the Interval, which I will share a little bit about right now. In the Interval is both an intimate family portrait and visual poem of Black and trans collective memory and belonging, meditating on themes of safety, bodily autonomy, and generations of compounding loss in the afterlives of slavery. Taking the form of a diptych, the first act interrogates the convergence of Black confrontations with police brutality and the annually increasing disparities of homicidal violence experienced by Black trans women and femmes, while the second act, which I'll show today, non-linearly traces the respective origins and evolutions of a Black non-binary trans femme scholar artist and her late father, who died unexpectedly 10 years prior to filming. And so there I am, and there's my father. So I think similar, actually, interestingly, I haven't thought about this until now. The impetus for this film was generated out of COVID as well. I was really looking for a way to grapple with, obviously, the burgeoning of unrest and particularly interested in ways that I could better understand the position of Black trans femmes and women in relationship to, I feel like, the more dominant discourse that was happening at the time of slaying Black cisgender and heterosexual men at the hands of the police. And so that was the beginnings of the project, and then it spawned into other things. But a little bit about the other themes that it was interested in looking at were, of course, identity, as I've already discussed, recognition and belonging, Black kinship, memory, death, grief and loss, and intergenerational transmission. And some of the ways that I was interested in getting at that was through what I already naturally gravitate toward, was this more experimental modes of address and unconventional interview formats, cinema verite. And I found the need over time to use various kind of disparate media, 16 millimeter and digital, family footage, archival and found footage, to also, in a way, illustrate through the mediums the very kinds of collisions of time and space that I was also discussing in the film. And that was also mirrored by the sound design, which I worked very closely with a beautiful sound artist named Dominique Bonelli. Their work is brilliant in its own right, but for this project, one of the things that we worked closely around was how to traverse different kinds of media sonically, and that also led to a very powerful, I think, soundscape in its own right. And these are just some of the footages that I was working with throughout the 23-minute film. And then some of my influences, I think, while not probably, it's not as evident as other figures in this film, I have to name Marlon Riggs as sort of the blueprint for me, because I credit seeing his film in my freshman year of college as kind of the impetus for what motivated me to pursue documentary filmmaking in the first place, and also really transformed and challenged my conceptions, and I think a lot of people's conceptions at the time and still, of what documentary is and what it could be and what it can provocatively accomplish by breaking down the boundaries of narrative and the real, and really just asking us to call into question some of the naturalized and flat distinctions that we have around objectivity that typically prevail in documentary practice. And so more contemporary influences, well, this is misplaced. Frantz Fanon is not contemporary, but theoretical impetus or motivation for the film was definitely from Frantz Fanon's Black Skin, White Masks, and predominantly Jourdain Gary's The Giverny Document, which was produced in 2019, and Arthur Jafa's Love is the Message is Death. And as it pertains to Arthur Jafa, it was mostly his use of found footage and viral media as a device to tell a story of its own. And I'm really interested in the ways, which will become clear in my work, how film or viral media says a lot or provides a kind of archive of the present, even when it's being operationalized for humor or anything but that. And then with Jourdain Gary's work, this film in particular was about the safety and bodily autonomy of Black women, but as she noted herself, one of the shortcomings that she launched against this film was that it didn't include the narrative of a Black trans woman, which this is from an interview she did in 2020 with Frank Wilderson that speaks to that. And so I was already working on the film when I saw this film, but then it kind of oriented me to start thinking about more particular ways that I could locate Black trans women in this reality.
What the fuck? Can I live?
Some clips from her film.
Can I live? Can I fucking live? Why y'all wanna fuck with me? Why?
Nothing more than feelings. Feelings. Nothing more than feelings. Feelings of love, you know that? Oh, your Constitution, well, my friend, it's gonna have to bend. I'm here to tell you about the destruction of all the evil it will have to end.
Land, a brooding mass of masonry erected without
So, won't get into all of this, but again, one of the primary figures I was looking at was really understanding how questions or conceptions of Black collectivity were relating to Black trans femmes or not, and how our particular and unique experiences of violence and vulnerability to it were being obfuscated and had been historically. And so Frantz Fanon's quotes from that book are woven throughout the film, one of which begins the second half, which I will begin in a moment. Yeah, so this is about 9 minutes, I think, and yeah, we'll just begin this and then I'll hand it over. Or not. And just a note that for people who are watching this live, you'll be seeing this, but in the recorded version of this that will be hosted online, it will be taken out. So happy viewing.
Thank you, Erica, for sharing the second half of your film. It was incredible to watch. And one of the roles you're going to play on the team here is going to work as you're going to be working as the creative and editorial producer. And so that film really makes me see how that's going to be such a good role for you, and the way that you're able to weave different media and narratives and stories together, and make something coherent and touching and emotive kind of come out of such a collection of things that are deeply personal at the same time. So thank you so much. I'll pass it over to Syrus. Tell us a little bit about your practice, and maybe we'll even have some time, then you'll be able to read us a bit of a story from some of the stuff that's been coming in from some of their contributors.
Absolutely. That's great. So I would love to. So yeah, my name is Cyrus, as I mentioned earlier. This is a little bit about what I make and what I do. I'm going to talk a little bit about the work that I created for the 2019 and 2022 Toronto Biennial, because they were speculative fiction imaginings of a potential world that doesn't, yet exist. So sort of dreaming into the future, as I was talking about earlier. The first project Jesse mentioned, it was a project called Ancestors, Do You Read Us? Dispatches from the Future. I had been doing portraits, large-scale drawings of activists, portraits of activists for about 8 years, and had been writing love letters to activists and getting strangers to write love letters to activists as part of my practice. And then I was invited to be part of the Toronto Biennial for 2019, and they offered me the chance to do 2 projects. And so I created both Antarctica and Ancestors, Do You Read Us? And Ancestors, Do You Read Us was at the Ryerson Image Center, and it had the potential of being an 8-channel video work. And so I decided to work with the idea of 8 channels to tell the story of a very different future. And so this is that quote that I mentioned at the beginning of the talk today, that whenever we envision a world without war, without violence, without prisons, we're engaging in speculative fiction. All activism is speculative fiction. Walida Marisha said that in Octavia's Brood. And so I created this speculative fiction story that imagined what would happen if we saw ourselves as ancestors, somebody's ancestors. What would happen if we actually saw ourselves not only 7 generations back, but also 7 generations forward, and we were able to actually plan and create a world that our great-great-grandchildren would want to live in and would want to be in. So what would happen if we could talk to our great-great-grandchildren? What would they have to say to us? What would they want to let us know? So I worked with activists and artists. This is Jazz Fairy J, Gloria Swain, Raven Wings, Tegan Davis, and Rodney DeVerlis here. And I created this work that was set in the year 2072, broadcast here in the Ryerson Image Center, imagining a world where our great-grandchildren had figured out a way using old technology to patch through different time zones to find us in 2019 here on this media wall, to give us a message of what they needed us to do in order to change the world and make a different kind of future. So I'm just going to play it for you now. It's just short.
Do you read me?
Do you read me?
Do you read us?
Can you
Do you
copy?
read us? Can you copy?
Do you read us?
Whoa, can you read me?
We are your great grandchildren. We have a message for you.
Culture.
The scene is really gone crazy out here right now.
Do you read us? Can you copy?
Do you read us? Can you copy?
We have a message for you from 2072.
We are your great-grandchildren.
We are your great-grandchildren. We have a message for you. The first thing we want to say is that we love you.
Is that we love you. It was because of you that we survived 3 generations past what was predicted.
It was because of you that we were able to stop this ravage of the earth, our mother.
We were able to stop this ravage of the earth.
The atomic age has moved forward at such a pace, the language of atomic warfare.
The atomic age has moved forward at such a pace. The language
of atomic warfare.
Do you read us?
Do you read us? Can you copy?
Do you read me? Can you copy?
The second thing is, we want to warn you.
We want to warn you.
You told us how to build this technology to contact you, to act, to rebel, to take this earth back from the capitalists.
You told us how to create this technology to contact you.
So we can tell you to act. To rebel.
Because one woman said, I have had enough.
To take back the earth.
Take it back.
To take back the earth from the capitalists. To find self-determination and freedom.
Black people survived
Black
because
people
of you.
survive.
Because of you.
It's not too late.
We want to thank you, ancestors. We love you.
We love you, ancestors.
We thank you.
Thank you, ancestors.
In transmission.
And transmission.
So that was Ancestors, Do You Read Us? Dispatches from the Future. That was the first project that I did for the Toronto Biennial for 2019. And they glitch through these different time zones. And so you get to see, I worked with found footage, and you see everything from Wattstack, which was the Black Woodstock put on by Stax Records out of Memphis, but based in Watts. The Rodney King riots, stuff that was happening in Hong Kong in terms of uprisings and activism, Rosa Parks, Marsha P. Johnson, Sylvia Rivera, Dwight Eisenhower talking about nuclear energy and the nuclear age, all of these different time zones that they glitch through as they try to find us in 2019 and ultimately do find us in 2019 and give us a message with some small directives of what we should do, like overthrow capitalism and solve climate change in order for them to have a free future. But it was really wonderful to create a work that was rooted in this idea of hope and this idea of possibility, that it was not too late, that we actually do get to change the world. They say in that video, Black people survive because of you, and that's based on this quote from the Combahee River Collective from the 1970s that said that if you made the world safer for those who are most marginalized, you're necessarily making the world safer for everyone. So therefore, if you make the world safer for Black women, they said in 1977, you'd necessarily be making the world safer for everyone. And so, you know, if we can sort of fast forward this, imagining if we've created a world where Black people have survived, therefore everyone and everything on this planet has survived as a result of our actions. So that was Ancestors Do Read Us, and it was a dispatch from the future. The other project I did for the biennial was Antarctica, and it presupposed this idea where it was set in the mirror in the future in the year 2027, where there was enough widespread race rioting and race wars and climate change, really, and extreme weather and sort of dangerous conditions, that people decide to go forward and attempt to colonize Antarctica. And this project grew out of a research I was doing into, or like I was looking up stuff about Antarctica. Research makes it sound a lot more official than what it was. But I was looking up stuff about Antarctica, and I found out not only that it had been divided up into pie-shaped future colonies, but set aside, due to the Antarctic Treaty written in the 1950s, set aside as a place for scientific research where no military activity would occur and where no one would live full-time year-round. That there was these pie-shaped future colonies. And I also found out that 11 people had been born in Antarctica, 10 of them sent there to be born to stake a future land claim, which I found kind of terrifying. So I wrote this story about what would happen what would the conditions need to be like for us to think of Antarctica as one of the last habitable places on Earth, and then what would happen if those 11 people were sent home, as you would say, to Antarctica to set up these future colonies. Would we ever realize that colonization is never okay? It's always a bad idea. So I worked with actors Raven Wings, Dainty Smith, and Yusuf Kadura, and we told the story of these 3 BIPOC Antarcticans who go down there all for their own different reasons, all to set up different colonies, but who find each other. And ultimately, due to one of them, the character played by Raven Wings, who's an activist, before she gets there, she convinces them to set off and to try to break away and not do what the company says. The entire set and the entire installation that the performance took place in was all white, so referencing the snow and the isolation of Antarctica, but also white supremacy. And there were these iceberg shapes that were hanging from the ceiling that also kind of looked like clan robes. And it was this sort of very creepy installation that ultimately had this play take place inside of the space, and had the Antarcticans finally, by the end of that play, deciding to break away and to go and swim to the one part of Antarctica that hadn't been claimed by a country, this area that in real life is called Mary Birdland. And they decide to set up what they call Freedom, which is their abolitionist community. And of course, when they get there, it turns out somebody's already there, as almost always happens in issues of migration. There is no terra nullius, and so anyways, there's somebody already living there, and to their surprise, they've planted a forest and there's lush green growing things. Got to work with actor Heath Salazar, also known as Gay Jesus, to take on the 4th character. This story is about trans justice, disability justice, Black liberation. There's a throuple that becomes sort of a quadruple in this iteration of the story. And it was this bright, vibrant, colorful. This is some of the textiles that we used that covered these multicolored domes that were found when the Antarcticans arrive in Mary Birdland. And then it became this 3-channel video work that told the story of what happens to them when they arrive there. But I'll stop there and just say, it was amazing to get to tell these speculative fiction stories and to get to imagine a future world where we got to talk about class and race and gender and all of these things in such a beautiful way. I thought what would be good to, a nice way to sort of wrap out what I wanted to share with you today was to give you a little taste of one of the stories from the collection that we're creating as part of No Future, No Cry, which I just want to say I'm so excited about. No Future, No Cry. So this story is by Yusuf Kadura, who wrote the story The Oracle and Her Mushroom, and I'll read it for you now. Our ancestors betrayed us. It's 2120 and the world has been transformed by their failure to protect the earth. She fought back. Floods, fires, plagues, all to push humanity from the places they used to occupy, leaving them at best as archaeological sites or playgrounds for wildlife, more often than not, though, as disaster zones. Humanity's refugees fled from the ever-expanding deserts along the equatorial belt to the few remaining settlements in the north. But new life emerged from the rising tides. Fungi adapted, thriving in our abandoned cities, decomposing, consuming the steel we left behind. Ancient plants sprouted beneath the melted ice caps, providing hardy and strange food sources for once threatened species. The elders remember the day the earth had had enough. The clouds had turned a sickly ashy white, and strange spores began falling like rain. The soil heaved, bellowing plumes of flame, and the sky closed over, stealing the stars away. Capitals began to fall, and monuments crumbled. It was the downtrodden who rose like a wave forth from the collapse. The victims of greed and violence survived because we had been doing so for so long already. We did not set out to rebuild what had before, but built anew, started listening to the planet, to her original inhabitants, the ones she sent messages to, warnings of things to come. Created the ears. We use them to listen, intercept what she intends for her other children, the trees, the fungi, the old inhabitants of the forests and the seas, warning of what approaches so that they can move, adapt, survive with her. We live because of this knowledge. The ears seem improbable at first glance, seemingly organic but not. Thin, pale white roots stretched down out of a silver tube, connecting them to its organically shaped polished metal stem, out of which flowers 3 dials. One is a glass bauble the size of a golf ball with a red pin suspended inside, spinning like a compass, confused about which way is north. Another has 6 rotating dials with various symbols and letters etched into each side. The third, nestled in the center of the formation, is a simple silver convex disc that flexes silently with the breeze, seemingly expanding with the presence of light. These almost living, delicate instruments require sustained care, and the knowledge of how to care for them and how to use them is guarded and kept close by those most trusted in our society, the oracles. They come from the poorest families. These few select children spend their youth learning to listen, to care for the ears. When they reach age of self-assurance, they are sent out to live in solitude along the edges of their settlements, in the wild places. They are known when they return with messages by their vestments of thick patchwork canvas coated in wax, heavy boots, and belts of woven strips of mixed fabric, often on which hangs a shovel, a tin water flask, and a short knife with an inwards curving blade. Today, in a settlement in the high north of what was once North America's continent, a young oracle begins her journey into solitude. Balhis leaves her childhood home before first light, not wishing for a parting word. A compact and weighty pack is strapped to her back. She strides past her neighbors' homes, their tiny spaces zealously watched over. She pauses to silently thank them for their protection. She thinks of the earth and with a deep breath presses on, past the high wood and wire barrier around their town and into the forest. Mosses and twisted saplings erupt from the pitched concrete on the forest floor. Caught up in the tree branches are tiny strips of plastics being corroded by the multicolored molds, giving off sickly fumes. She feels the rising warmth from the morning sun beneath the smog and marches deeper into the thick thickets, the remnants of a metropolis long abandoned. The climbing heat thumps up from the fractured pavement until finally the midday sun forces her to take shelter. finding cover in a ruined hovel with a sun-faded menu hanging by a nail outside of it. She grounds herself and takes in her surroundings. Eyeing the shaded tables and desiccated trash bins, she steps around a broken countertop, the skeletal display case, and spies, beneath a stripped espresso machine, a fistful of familiar-looking mushrooms bursting from a pile of rotted wood and petrified coffee grinds. Dropping to a crouch, Balhis removes her pack, her hand fumbling as she opens it. "Where do you come from, little ones?" she murmurs to the fruity mushrooms as her hand almost absent-mindedly but delicately draws the ears from her bag, her fingers twisting the synthetic roots into the mushroom's gills. Placing her left hand on the silver disc, with a breath she finds stillness, listening to the pulses imperceptibly rolling up from the roots and through the delicate stems, silently worrying the ears to life. She recites to the disturbed spores of the mushrooms and her thumping anxiety, "I am but one among the many children of earth. I come to you, elder of the species, humbled by the meddling of my forefathers. Let me listen and show me, where do you reside?" Her focus narrows and the dials begin to spin. The needle suspended in the glass bottle begins to spiral, and the silver disc pulses stronger than silence. The needle settles and points directly downward. She presses into the floorboards beneath her feet, feeling them give and bounce slightly. A basement. Pausing to thank the mushrooms, she removes the ears from their gills. In the back, hidden from behind fresh vines, is a rotted door. Its handle crumbles with the force of her palm. The steps leading down have rotted away, and there is a 10-foot drop to the floor below. She deftly leaps into the inky blackness of the room and pulls an ancient flashlight from her bag. The light blinds her momentarily, and when her vision returns, her breath escapes from her throat. In this tiny basement, there is new life. Umbrella-sized mushrooms erupt from the walls, brimming with beetles and other insects. From the ceiling, multicolored vines and roots hang loosely in reds and greens and purples and browns. In the creases there are flowers and strange fruits. The floor of what entrances her, though. The stone has rotted into nothingness, and in its place is a mass of mycelium, thrumming, breathing, with a crown of mushrooms expanding out from the center. Her heart beats fast. She can spy upon the earth here. Stepping forward gingerly, she centers herself in the circle, burying the roots of her ears deeply into a network of mycelium below, being careful not to disturb the fruiting mushrooms at its edges. With her flask, she feeds the earth, the ground opening to the synthetic roots deep into their network. It's working. But then, with a sudden flash, the ears spark and scream, and she has to cover her eyes to protect them from the shower of flames which shatter the bulb and her flashlight. Darkness. Her lungs are in her throat, her heart in her stomach. She's silent in fear. This is not normal. She fears her body is broken from the blast. Her mind races. Was she gifted a broken ear? Is this her fault? Or worse, have her actions harmed the earth? Light begins to flicker and glow. A spark, perhaps? No, it's the mushrooms. Light blue purple hues begin to expand and pulse from the beings in the basement. In the center of the circle, she hears the ears whir. She looks in wonder as they pulse faster and faster and scrambles forward, placing both the palms on the now slightly ashen disc, and listens, closing her eyes as her mind is pierced by the cacophonous voices thrumming up her wrist and into her spine. We know you're there. Why have you disturbed us, strange thing? Her eyes flash open. This can't be. She must have hit her head. Or the ears are broken. Mushrooms don't speak her language. The mycelium pitches below her, and she hears through her palms. We feel your fear. It's flowing from something, from the center of your being. Do not be afraid. Now, what are you, and why do you disturb us? My name is Balhis, she says, the words unwittingly escaping her vocal cords. I am an oracle, a protector of my people. What are you? I am below your feet. They pause. Your roots feel wrong. They don't belong here, yet they have been invading my brethren's land for many cycles now. Why do you disturb us? To learn. Learn what? Learn what threatens us before it can hurt us. Learn of fire, flood, disease. You are wise, so with these roots we listen. We try to interpret, you spy. You have caused great hurt. Our siblings have told us of the pain they feel from your piercing instruments. We were listening back, learning your languages. Tell me why we should not leave you in silence. Thou has paused. Are we not better? I apologize for the sins of my ancestors, the ones who betrayed the earth, but we have changed. We protect your siblings, use our knowledge to prolong your lives, give nutrients back to you. We do not use you for anything else. Are we not better? You think you are better, the ear shook with intensity. You are not better. You are survivors of calamity caused by the inaction of those before you. You have not chosen better. You have chosen to survive. Your tools bite, claw, they maim us. Do you think you are noble for being forced to survive? Your kind still choose to spy and steal. We did not know. How could I? Quiet. You are afraid. Worry not, I will not harm you, but we might not help you. We would have our siblings change our language so your kind can no longer hear us. Please don't leave us. We're learning, we're trying, we're changing. What have these promises done? We have heard them on the wind since your kind emerged. Broken promises. Words mean nothing to you, we have decided. You must reconcile with us. Eat only what is given, give back more than you take, and do not speak to us of better. Remove your ears from our flesh and return our shared sphere to natural order. No, we need your knowledge, else the world will destroy us. I cannot remove these ears, or my loved ones, my siblings, my brethren will be left defenseless. Do not be so cruel, please. Tears streamed down from her cheeks and into the breathing mass beneath. Please do not leave us to face the world alone. You shall not be. Do not weep, little Balhis. I feel the sadness in your waters. Remove the ears, and in return, I shall give you a little piece of me to take back to your kind. Plant us in your homes, tend to us, and if you do this, we shall call out to you when you are in need. But you must remove these unnatural contraptions, or never hear our voices again. With that, the ears and the earth fell silent, and the lights dimmed. Her heart still in her throat, stomach in her lungs. In a moment of seeming eternal silence, Balhis breathes deep. I shall be better. With that, she uproots the dense, ashy ears, tearing them into pieces with her hands, and carefully places the mass of twisted material in a bunch of newly fruiting metal-eating mushrooms. Shakily coming to her feet, a vine unfurls from above, and nestled in its creases, presented to her, is a fistful of new spores. Thank you. That was a story by Yusuf Kadura.
Thank you, Syrus and Yusuf. The wisdom of the fungi are endlessly inspirational, and I hope we get some more fungi stories coming in. Maybe you could just start off and tell us a little bit about maybe what to expect through the series and when it might be coming out and how it's all coming together.
It's been amazing working on this so far. So we are just in the process of soliciting some new stories. We also have some great stories that have already been written by some incredible folks. I mentioned Yusuf Kadura. We also have stories by Sandy Hudson, and it's just some really great folks. And Leah Lakshmi Piepsia Samarasina, and just some really great stories. And so we're in the process of getting some new stories just to flesh out the program in the season. And we're working on a first season of a podcast series called No Future, No Cry, which will be these beautiful soundscaped storytelling moments where we get to hear these different stories from the collection. So we're hoping to have, I actually think I'm not going to remember exactly when the first bit of stories are supposed to be coming out, but maybe I'll pass it to Erica. But if you remember Erica. But yeah, we're in the process of getting some new stories and starting to put together what the podcast is going to look and feel and sound like.
Yeah, also excited. I think we were aiming for late summer, early fall, for the first season. But in addition to that, I don't think there's much more I can share beyond that. We were in discussion of several different formats for the project when we met in Vancouver in December, and then settled on a podcast being a way for sound to really become a character itself for the stories and take a new shape and life of its own, which I'm really excited for. So.
Great. So stay tuned to 218's channels or Syrus and Erica's socials, and you'll find out more later this year about where to pick up some of the stories for yourself in writing or through your earbuds. Let's see. What are you each most excited about with this project?
I'm most excited to hear from authors who and writers and activists and artists and storytellers who often are really engaged in trying to transform the present. I want to hear what they're dreaming into. If they're practicing the future, what future are they practicing? Where did they imagine us going? I'm so curious to ask different folks, where do you see us being in 100 years? And I've been sort of obsessed and fascinated with asking people, my favorite question, which is if you could travel to any time in human history and get involved in a social movement or a moment of activism, where would you go and when would you go and why? And I love it when I ask that question when I'm doing drawing projects, and people talk about going to the future and they want to see what the next 100 years, 200 years, 1,000 years looks like. So anyways, I'm just really excited to dream into the next 100 years with the people and to sort of imagine what future they're practicing into.
Yeah, similar to that, I'm really interested in hearing from people who don't typically do the particular thing we're asking them to do, write a story, and the kinds of generative ideas that come from that. But I think in addition to that, I'm interested in one of the things that interested me in taking participating in the project when Syrus invited me was that in my own practice and my scholarly work, I don't often think about the future, which I kind of thought about as a problem and something I would like to do more of. I think a lot about the history of the present and thinking about time as a product of that and legacies of colonialism in that way, but having to project forward is not something I often find myself being tasked to do. And that's something that I was really interested and intrigued in hearing other people's thoughts and also hopefully, developing more thoughts of my own. So thanks so much again for the invitation. I'm so excited to be a part of this.
You both. I'll open it up to our attendees today. If you have any questions about the project or about Syrus and Erica's practice, please raise your hand and we can bring you into the panel, or you can ask it in the Q&A box. I guess what I'm most excited about is probably the soundscaping. And I know that's something that you're going to work on, Erica, and you've got some folks to connect us to. And it's just something that I've never really been involved with before, but I think it's going to be such an interesting way to try and kind of tell the stories and create that soundscape, which kind of attaches you to the narrative in a much different way than if you were just kind of reading it.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that too, and just that can bring it all together. When I was working with the Mary Birdland Freedom Project, for that project, it's a speculative fiction video work where they get to the free territory and find someone already living there. But I worked with Lau, this electronic duo out of Taekwondo, to do the soundscape, and it just transforms the whole story when you have that. So I'm really excited to work with some sound folks and to really you know, you can imagine even in the story that we just heard from Yusuf Kadura, like all of the, you know, what do the ears sound like, and what do the mushrooms sound like, and the mycelial networks, and what is the soundscape that goes underneath a story like that? You know, I'm really excited to play with that.
Right. Just two things coming in. Laura Fukumoto says, just wanted to say, I found both of your presentations moving and insightful. The future is bright. And a question coming through from an anonymous attendee. Curious to know more about the title of the project, No Future, No Cry.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much for for connecting with our work, and I'm glad that our presentation spoke to you. And then for the person who's asking about No Future, No Cry, we actually were you know, brainstorming and playing around with titles. Jesse mentioned there is a book project, so there are all of these stories together are going to be part of a book project that we're that I'm working on right now. And you know, that book project was sort of thought of as being dispatches from the future, as well, drawing from ancestors. Do you read us dispatches from the future? We were playing around with titles for the podcast and for the media portion of this, and at some point we started you know, playing with this idea of kind of like No Woman, No Cry, but then like No Future, No Cry, and playing around with it. And then it turns out that there is a Japanese hardcore punk band that has a song called No Future, No Cry with an incredible chorus. And we just were like, wow, this is amazing. And it's the lyrics of the song are actually quite profound, actually, and it's quite a gem. So it just seemed to really click, this idea of this title, that we you know, actually do very much care that we have a future that we survive into, that we make it through, that we absolutely are interested in creating the kind of future where we make it. And it's this idea that, you know, if we thank you, Jesse, for posting the link, that if we don't you know, if we don't actually plan and create for a future, we're gonna have a problem. So
Great. Thank you, Syrus. Yeah, I posted the link in there if anybody would like to enjoy No Future, No Cry. We still have to get in touch with the band and ask maybe we could use some of their track as our intro, outro theme music. It seems fitting. So great. So if there's no more questions coming through from our audience today, I think that's a good place to leave it. And please stay tuned. There'll be more information coming out about how to tune into the podcast and potentially pick up the book later this year. Thank you so much, Syrus and æryka, for working with us and following the fellowship program. Enjoy your evenings and afternoons, and we'll speak soon.
thank you so much, Jesse. Thank you, Tao. Thanks everyone at 221A and Visitor Media, and thanks to the Canada Council so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye now.
Bye.